Keisha's heartbeat pounded like a drum in her ears. The doctor's lips were moving, but her mind refused to absorb the words. She clutched Jamal's hand so tightly that her nails dug into his skin. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly, but in that moment, everything felt deafeningly silent. "There are some concerns about your baby's vision," the doctor said gently. "She may be blind." The air in the room thickened. Keisha felt it pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. She wanted to scream, to demand a different answer, but her throat had closed up. Jamal was the first to find his voice. "But she's healthy." His tone was measured, steady. The doctor nodded. "Yes, other than the concerns with her vision, everything else looks normal. Further tests will give us more clarity." He softened his tone. "No matter what, she will still be your daughter." Keisha barely heard the words. Blind? How was that possible? She had done everything right during her pregnancy. No alcohol, no smoking, no missed checkups. So why was this happening? Jamal turned to her, his grip firm but reassuring. "Baby, we'll figure this out," he whispered. His eyes, always full of certainty, searched hers for an answer she didn't have. Keisha nodded, but inside, a storm raged. This wasn't what she had pictured. She had imagined watching her baby's eyes light up at the sight of her parents. She had dreamed of reading bedtime stories, pointing at pictures, and seeing her daughter giggle at the bright colors. But now, would Agnes ever see her face? Would she ever know what a sunset looked like? That night, Keisha lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her body motionless, but her mind restless. Jamal slept beside her, his breaths slow and even. She invited his calm. She placed a protective hand over her belly. "I love you," she whispered, "but I don't know if I can do this." The days leading up to Agnes' birth crawled by in a haze of anxiety and unanswered questions. Keisha buried herself in research, reading every article she could find about childhood blindness. Some stories were hopeful, children who learned to navigate the world with extraordinary abilities. But others were heartbreaking. Kids who struggled, isolated from a world they could never fully experience. Jamal remained her rock. He brushed off her worst fears with confidence. "She'll have us," he reminded her. "She won't need the world to be kind to her. She'll have us." But Keisha wasn't so sure. Love wasn't always enough. Then the moment came. The pain of childbirth was nothing compared to the terror that gripped Keisha's heart. The sterile smell of the hospital, the beeping machines, the nurses' hushed voices, everything felt unreal. Then, a sharp cry filled the room. Keisha gasped, her body flooded with exhaustion and relief. The doctor handed her a tiny, warm body, wrapped snugly in a soft pink blanket. "Here she is," the nurse murmured. Keisha looked down at her daughter, and for the first time, her fears took a backseat. Agnes was beautiful. Her skin was soft as rose petals, her lips a perfect little bow. She had a head full of dark curls, and her tiny fingers curled instinctively around Keisha's thumb. But then, Keisha's gaze drifted to her eyes. Agnes' eyelids fluttered, but they didn't focus. They wandered, unfocused, searching for something that wasn't there. A lump formed in Keisha's throat. Jamal leaned in, pressing a kiss to Agnes' forehead. "She's perfect," he whispered. Keisha wanted to say the same, but the words felt stuck. She wanted to see perfection. She wanted to feel nothing but love. But beneath the overwhelming joy of becoming a mother, an ache lingered. Would she be enough for this child? Would they be enough? The doctor's voice echoed in her mind. "She will still be your daughter." Keisha knew that. She knew love wasn't supposed to depend on expectations. But love also wasn't supposed to come with so much fear. Jamal reached for her hand. "She's going to be okay," he said softly. "We're going to love her, no matter what." Keisha looked at her husband, the man who had never once wavered in his belief that they would be fine. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to feel the certainty he did. She traced a finger along Agnes' delicate cheek. The baby stirred slightly, turning her head at the touch, already recognizing her mother's warmth. Keisha exhaled slowly. Maybe Agnes didn't need to see her to know she was loved. Maybe Keisha didn't need all the answers right now. Maybe love, fear, and all was enough. Keisha knew from the start that raising Agnes wouldn't be easy, but knowing and living it were two different things. As an infant, Agnes never turned toward the light streaming through the window or reacted when the mobile above her crib spun. At 6 months, she didn't reach for the colorful toy blocks Keisha placed in front of her. Instead, she responded to sounds: the jingle of Keisha's bracelets, the snap of Jamal's fingers, the crinkle of wrapping paper. Keisha would watch other babies in the park, their chubby fingers grasping at the world around them, and wonder, why me? But if she ever let her doubts show, Jamal was quick to counter them with unwavering faith. "She's just figuring things out in her own way," he'd say as he balanced Agnes on his broad shoulders, letting her giggle at the way his deep voice rumbled in her ears. Keisha wanted to believe him. Some days she did, but other days the fear crept back in. Like the time Agnes was learning to walk, most toddlers reached for a parent's hands, guiding themselves forward with trust. Agnes, however, took hesitant steps, hands stretched in front of her, searching for something solid. One night, Keisha sat on the floor beside her, arms open. "Come here, baby," she coaxed. Agnes wobbled but didn't move, her little brows furrowed in concentration. "It's okay," Jamal whispered from behind. "She just needs to hear you, not see you." Keisha swallowed her doubt and tried again. "I'm right here, Agnes." She clapped gently. "Follow my voice." Slowly, Agnes took a shaky step, then another, and then she fell. Keisha moved to scoop her up, but Agnes surprised her by pushing herself back up, determination etched across her tiny face. She tried again, and again. By the end of the week, Agnes was walking. By the end of the month, she was running. Jamal grinned. "Told you she's strong." Keisha nodded, smiling. But deep down, she still wondered, will the world be kind to her? When Agnes turned 5, Keisha and Jamal enrolled her in a school for children with special needs. They told themselves it was the best place for her, a place where she'd be understood, protected. But protection wasn't always enough. One evening, Agnes came home quiet, too quiet. Keisha noticed it immediately. She was usually full of stories about school, her words spilling out faster than her mouth could keep up. But that night, she sat at the table, running her fingers over her Braille homework, silent. "Baby." Keisha knelt beside her. "What's wrong?" Agnes hesitated. Then, slowly, she lifted her sleeve. Keisha's breath caught in her throat. Dark bruises, faint but unmistakable, marred her small arm. Jamal's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. His voice was tight. "Who did this to you?" "A boy pushed me," Agnes murmured. Keisha felt her heart split. "Why?" Agnes swallowed. "He said I was useless because I can't see." A sharp, burning anger surged through Keisha, drowning out all reason. She wanted to find that boy, to demand why. Why he would do this, why he would make her daughter feel small. But before she could say anything, Agnes lifted her chin. "It's okay, Mama," she said softly. "He doesn't know what I can do." Keisha blinked, taken aback. "Baby, that's not okay." Agnes shook her head. "I mean, he just doesn't understand yet. But he will." Her words were simple, but they struck Keisha like a thunderclap. Agnes wasn't crying. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't even asking for help. She was ready to prove herself. That night, Keisha lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind restless. She had spent years fearing what the world would do to Agnes. She had imagined every struggle, every heartbreak, every cruel word. But maybe she had been looking at it the wrong way. Maybe it wasn't Agnes who needed to be strong. Maybe it was her. Because Agnes wasn't just surviving. She was fighting. And if her daughter was ready to face the world head-on, Then it was time Keisha did the same. The numbers danced in Agnes' mind like a song she had always known. While other kids saw confusing symbols, she saw patterns, an unbreakable logic that made sense even when the rest of the world didn't. At school, Agnes wasn't the loudest. She didn't push for attention. She didn't need to. When her fingers skimmed the raised dots of her Braille math book, she moved faster than anyone else in the class. She solved problems in her head before her classmates even finished reading them. But not everyone saw her brilliance, especially not Ms. Simmons. Miss Simmons had sharp eyes that never softened and a voice that could slice through stone. She had taught at the school for years and believed that discipline mattered more than talent. She believed in rules, structure, and she certainly didn't believe that a blind girl could outshine the rest of the class. One afternoon, as the students settled into their seats, Ms. Simmons paced at the front of the room, chalk in hand. She tapped it against the blackboard, eyeing Agnes with something that almost looked like amusement. "Agnes," she called. Agnes sat up straight. "Yes, Mom." Ms. Simmons smirked. "Let's see if you're as smart as you think you are." The room went silent. The teacher turned to the board and began scribbling a long mathematical equation, her wrist moving swiftly as she filled the space with numbers and symbols. The students began whispering. Some snickered. Others leaned forward in anticipation. Miss Simmons stepped back, crossing her arms. "Solve it." Agnes didn't flinch. She stood, feeling for the edge of her desk, then walked confidently to the board. A few students exchanged glances. "How's she gonna do it?" One boy whispered. "She can't even see it," another muttered. Miss Simmons smiled, certain that Agnes would hesitate, struggle, maybe even embarrass herself. But Agnes simply ran her fingers across the numbers, feeling the indentations of the chalk against the smooth board. Her mind worked quickly, absorbing the equation. And then, without missing a beat, she picked up a piece of chalk. The room fell into stunned silence as Agnes began solving the problem in real time. Her fingers glided across the board, forming numbers with sharp precision. No hesitation, no second guessing. The answer was as clear to her as the sound of a heartbeat. When she finished, she put the chalk down and turned to face Miss Simmons. "Done." Miss Simmons blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She stepped forward, eyes scanning Agnes' answer. It was flawless. One of the students gasped. Another let out a low whistle. The teacher's face paled. She had set a trap for Agnes, and Agnes had walked right through it, untouched. Miss Simmons cleared her throat. "Class dismissed," she muttered before turning away. But the students didn't move. For the first time, they weren't looking at Agnes with pity. They were looking at her with awe. Keisha's phone rang that afternoon. "Mrs. Robinson, we need you to come to the school," the principal's voice said. Keisha's stomach tightened. Had something happened to Agnes? When she arrived, she was directed to the principal's office, where she found Agnes sitting calmly in a chair. Across from her, Ms. Simmons sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. Keisha didn't waste time. "What happened?" The principal sighed. "Ms. Simmons made a mistake today." Keisha's heart pounded. What kind of mistake? Ms. Simmons, looking humiliated, spoke without meeting her gaze. I tried to challenge Agnes with an advanced math problem in front of the class." Keisha's stomach dropped. "And?" Ms. Simmons swallowed. "She solved it, faster than I could." Jamal, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. "So what's the problem?" The principal hesitated. "There isn't one, Mr. Robinson. In fact, we've contacted the district's gifted program. Agnes may be eligible for higher-level classes." Keisha turned to her daughter, who sat there, unshaken, as if none of this had surprised her. For the first time in years, the last of Keisha's doubt melted away. Agnes wasn't weak. She wasn't a victim. She was unstoppable. Agnes' story spread beyond the walls of her classroom. At first, it was just whispers, students murmuring about how the blind girl had outsmarted their teacher. Then it became something bigger. Teachers from other classes started asking her questions, testing her knowledge, and leaving astonished when she solved complex equations faster than they could. The boy who had once bullied her for being blind now sat beside her in class, nervously tapping his pencil against his notebook. Agnes, he muttered one afternoon. She turned toward him, her head tilting slightly. Yes? I don't get this problem. Can you help? For a moment, she thought of the day he had pushed her, the way he had made her feel small. But that was the past. Agnes nodded. Of course. As she guided him through the equation, she realized something. People weren't born understanding. They had to be taught, and she was ready to teach. Even Miss Simmons, the woman who had once tried to humiliate her, changed. A week after the incident, she stood before the class, her usual sternness replaced by something softer. I misjudged Agnes, she admitted. I was wrong to doubt her, and I apologize. Agnes didn't need the apology, but hearing it made her realize how much she had won, not just respect, but the right to be seen as more than a blind girl. She had earned her place. Bigger dreams. But Agnes didn't stop there. She spent hours after school solving equations on her Braille tablet, her fingers moving swiftly over the raised dots. While other kids played video games or scrolled through social media, she immersed herself in the world of numbers. She loved the challenge, the way math was constant, unchanging. It didn't care if she was blind. It only cared if she understood. One evening, Keisha sat across from her, watching as Agnes worked through a problem far beyond anything a typical middle schooler would attempt. You're amazing, you know that, Keisha whispered. Agnes paused, smiling. I told you, Mama. He didn't know what I could do. Keisha's eyes burned with unshed tears. She thought back to the fear she had once held, the sleepless nights wondering if her daughter would ever find her place in the world. Now she wasn't just finding her place, she was creating it. The world didn't know it yet, but Agnes was going to change it. And nothing, not blindness, not doubt, not even the limits others tried to place on her, was going to stop her. Agnes' journey proves that no obstacle is too great when determination and talent come together. She turned doubt into fuel, setbacks into stepping stones, and proved that limitations exist only in the mind. If you found Agnes' story inspiring, don't keep it to yourself. Like this story if it moved you. Subscribe for more powerful stories that challenge expectations and celebrate resilience. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that they are stronger than they think. The world needs more unstoppable people like Agnes. Are you ready to be one of them?